Is the Motorola Moto G Pure a good phone to buy in 2022? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. What's going on, everybody? Kalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Motorola Moto G Pure and going over whether or not it's a good phone to buy in 2022. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to learn more about the phone, be sure to check out my tips and tricks videos for it as well. But with that being said, let's get started. So this phone has a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of about 80.6%. I do have the brightness at 100% right now, and I would say it looks pretty good. The image is decently sharp for being only 720p, and the colors look pretty nice. Overall, the specs of this display are really nothing special. Pretty much every phone in this price range is going to have the same kind of display, 6.5 inches, 720p display, some sort of LCD. It's really nothing unique, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I personally think these displays are actually pretty good for what they are. At 6.5 inches, this display is not going to be so large that it's uncomfortable to hold, but it's still going to be large enough to give you a good experience for most types of content consumption. So if you're streaming videos, playing games, viewing photos, even reading, everything is going to show up decently large on here, so it'll be easier to see. And we got a decently tall form factor here, so more stuff in general is going to be able to fit on the screen, which is going to make reading a lot easier. And when you're watching videos in landscape mode, you're going to be able to see everything in a nice cinematic way. Now up here for the front-facing camera, we got a water drop notch, and this camera is 5 megapixels. Overall, the bezels are a little bit on the thicker side compared to some of the more modern looking phones like the Samsung Galaxy A03s, but it still doesn't really look bad. The phone in general is decently slim, and that's going to make it a lot more comfortable to put in your pocket. For storage, we're getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage with this phone, with microSD card expansion as well. Now, I've definitely seen better. The Blue G91 and V91, for example, have much more storage than this, and even some of the lower-end Samsung phones as well. Even for the average user, I feel like it's pretty easy to go through 32 gigabytes. So if you're planning on doing a lot with your phone, I definitely recommend getting a microSD card, because again, even if you're really careful, you're probably going to go through 32 gigabytes a lot faster than you might expect. Now, there's no wireless charging with this phone, which is not really a surprise, because very few phones in this price range have that feature, but we do have a fingerprint scanner right here on the back. And we also have face unlock with this phone, which I think is really nice, because while it's not really uncommon for a phone to have both, in this price range, you don't always see it. So having two options to unlock your phone without the pin never really hurts. Now with that being said, we're going to test out the fingerprint scanner and see how well it performs. There we go, one more time. And there we go. As you can see, it's decently fast and responsive. No issues here. Now taking a look at the rear camera setup here, we got a dual camera with a 13 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So not a bad setup, but really not the best either. I don't personally count the depth sensing camera as an additional camera, just because all the depth sensing camera is really for is portrait mode. But all the same, at least we get that, even though it would have been nice to see an ultra wide camera or a macro camera. Now to give you an idea of what this camera can do, this is a photo taken with the main camera. As you can see, the picture does look pretty good. It could be a little brighter, but the details and colors still look really nice. So if you're a more casual user of the camera and you like to take a few photos here and there for social media or something like that, this phone should be fine. But if you like to take lots of pictures and you're using your camera constantly, I would personally consider a different device with a better camera setup. Now going into the camera app itself, this is the regular photo mode. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Then if you want to go to video mode, as you can see, this is video mode. And with this mode, you can shoot videos in up to 1080p in both the rear and the front cameras. Then if we go over to the More tab, we have several different options here. We got portrait, panorama. This is a really cool feature right here. Live filter, there's pro mode, and you can make time lapses as well. So the camera does have a pretty decent set of features for what it is. But again, if you're more focused on the camera and you're constantly taking pictures, you're probably going to be a little disappointed by this phone, because although it does have a decent amount of features, it doesn't really have anything the average phone doesn't. And if you're taking lots of pictures, if you're really into that, you're probably going to want at least an ultra-wide camera, if not a macro camera too. And there are definitely phones not much more expensive than this that have much better setups. But again, if you're a more casual user and you just want to snap a few photos here and there for something like social media, this phone will get the job done. Now internally, the Moto G Pure is getting 3 GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G25 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on the phone, and it came back with a single core score of 133 and a multi-core score of 497. Now these numbers really don't mean a whole lot unless you have something to compare them to, but I will tell you, this is not a very powerful processor. If you're just going to be using the phone for basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web a little bit, and maybe some light video streaming and social media use, this phone will get the job done, but keep in mind that it's not going to be very fast. So if you're constantly on your phone, you're probably going to want to consider a different device with more processing power. But with that being said, while I've been testing out this phone, I haven't had any performance issues. This phone has a 4,000 mAh battery that supports 10 watt fast charging. So this is not bad at all. It's not quite a 5,000 mAh battery that's typically regarded as the big one, but it's not half bad either. So if you're looking for a phone with lots of battery life where you can use it heavily throughout the day and not really need to charge it, this phone is still going to be a viable option for that. And even if it does start dying in the middle of the day, the fast charging is going to help you charge up the phone a lot faster and more efficiently, so you won't have to wait as long. Also down the road, since the battery is still decently on the bigger side, it's going to have a little bit more longevity than the average phone. So as a result, you'll be able to keep the phone for a longer period of time without having to replace it. So if you don't really like buying a phone every year, the Moto G Pure is going to be a good option for you. Now keep in mind, this phone doesn't have NFC, so if you use Google Pay, you're probably going to want to consider a different device that does have NFC, because in case you don't know, NFC is the actual technology behind contactless mobile payment services, so without it, you can't use that kind of feature. But now that we've gone over some of the specs of the phone, let's take a closer look at the device itself. So on the left here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. On the bottom, we got the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right side, we got the power key and our volume keys. On the top of the phone, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack and the noise canceling microphone. On the back, we got the camera setup, the flash, and the fingerprint scanner. The back is made of a slightly shiny material that's definitely not nearly as bad as the glossy material when it comes to fingerprints. You can kind of see them in the light, but at this angle you really can't. It also has a cool texture to it. Like I said earlier in the video, this phone is also decently slim, so it's not going to be uncomfortable to hold in your hand or carry in your pocket. So in conclusion, is the Motorola Moto G Pure worth buying in 2022? I would say despite a few shortcomings, it's still worth buying in 2022. While it's not really anything special, it doesn't really have any unique features that make it stand out from any other phone in its price range. It's still a solid device. It does have a pretty weak processor. That's one thing I really don't like about it. But other than that, it does have a really nice looking display, a decently usable camera that I would say you can easily use for social media or something like that, and it has a pretty big battery as well. The only real complaints I have about it are the storage, which you can kind of remedy with a microSD card anyway, so it's not too big a deal. And the processor, again, it's really not very powerful. And it also would have been nice to see an ultra-wide camera or macro camera on the camera setup. But other than that, I do think this phone is a solid entry-level phone. If you're just looking for something to use for basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, or maybe some light social media use. Once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, or if you happen to be watching this after you bought it, be sure to check out my tips and tricks videos for the device as well. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I will see you in the next video.